In 2012, Nick Wallenda, whose family is synonymous with high wire walks, added his name to the list of daredevils to enter Niagara lore. Names such as Farini and Blondin when he walked across the gorge. Unlike his predecessors, Nick crossed directly over the Horseshoe Falls. And while he did not hum Nearer My God to Thee, Network Mics did record Nick conversing with God. Not long before he made history, Nick joined us from Florida. I asked him why God would want him to walk a tightrope across Niagara.
I hope that what I do is very encouraging to others. You know, God's grace is powerful and strong, and questions like this come up often. I've done media interviews around the world, and you know, I've known since I was a child that God was going to put me on a platform and use me to bring people to His kingdom. And I knew that all along, and God, you know, He told me that when I was about 13 years old. He said two things. He said, I'm going to bless you beyond belief, and I'm going to use you to bring people to the kingdom. So I knew that that was coming. I was raised in a Christian household and was always ready for it. I just didn't know in what capacity it was going to be.
Water, as it so often does, dominated stories of life and death in 2012. Hurricane Sandy devastated the Atlantic coast in October. Once its winds had subsided, it had left behind well over 100 dead and damage in the billions of dollars. While on the other side of the world, entire cultures struggle to find the daily supply of clean water necessary to sustain life. Where was God? Very active, it seems, in the work of groups such as H2O for All. Co-founder Tim Mutu told us why on earth he left a multi-billion-dollar company to dedicate himself to this ministry.
Water is the #1 thing that we need to survive. It really is. And most of the diseases that are happening, most of the hospital beds that fill up the hospitals are all related to preventable diseases. And I really think God wants us to use our giftings and talents, wants us to say, well, what do we have to offer to somebody that might not have what we have?
Legendary Calgary newspaperman Bob Edwards once wrote, if it's all the same to history, it need not repeat itself anymore. He could easily have been referring to the Middle East of 2012, which saw a bloody civil war in Syria, Arab Spring aftershocks in Cairo, and an escalation of violence in Gaza. Just as provocative cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad sparked violence 7 years ago, anti-Islamic acts, including a caustic anti-Muslim film, stirred more violence, which included the assassination of U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens in Benghazi. We discussed the fallout when faith turns violent with Raheel Raza, founder of Muslims Facing Tomorrow, and Egyptian Christian activist Nader Fauzi. I began by remarking on the fatwa against Mr. Fauzi, an Islamic decree calling for his death.
Well, before I begin, let me also inform you, much to your horror, that I too have a fatwa on my head. So let me join the group. I have death threats and a fatwa, but for entirely different reasons.
But we shouldn't make light of these.
No,
these are real.
Make light of it. What has happened in terms of the fatwa on Nader's head is absolutely horrible, unacceptable, atrocious, should not be part of any faith. It is, you know, politically motivated, or actually where it's come from, only Nader can tell you, because, you know, this is a shot out of the blue.
Nader, have you had any involvement with this film?
I have nothing to do with it. I didn't see the movie. I was shocked that they even mentioned my name.
Why then does the government of Egypt want to arrest you?
We have to go back 5 years ago. I'm activist, as you know, and Egypt always was denied that they are treating the Egyptian Christian bad.
And you put it all together in a book.
Exactly.
5 years ago. Yeah. And that's when this began.
So
you put the persecutions.
So the Egyptian government decided to arrest me.
Shortly after that interview, the Egyptian government sentenced Toronto's Nader Fauzi to death in absentia. And while this new hatred flares, stories from past generations are emerging. One is of an extraordinary Christian woman, Marina Namat. As a teenager during the Iranian Revolution, she was arrested shortly after speaking out in a classroom. Here, she told us of how she coped with the torture and abuse that followed.
Then I was there, and I was ready to say I didn't know Jesus. I was ready to say anything. I was ready to do anything. And that was when I realized how difficult it is to stand up for what you believe in. The only person to look up to was, well, of course, was Jesus, because he was tortured and he was executed. So we had been in the same boat. And another thing that I had never understood and I had always questioned was that why on the cross did he say, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? And I got it. I really, really got it. And when you lose everything and you realize that on your own you have no merit whatsoever, that you have betrayed everything you are, you have betrayed God, you have betrayed yourself, you have betrayed your family, you have betrayed your religion, what more can you do that is just horrible? And that was when I actually found that the person of Jesus on the cross, that's the only place I can go to become whole again, but it is not because of my merit, of my strength. It is his, not mine. And it was through that discovery that I started feeling really comfortable with who I was. And that was the moment, that was the moment of faith for me. I think for me, faith is the acceptance that I am nothing. Absolutely. And there's no better place than a political prison, tied up to a torture bed, being raped, whatever, all of that, to discover that.
The stories of 2012 are like pieces in a puzzle. But what do they look like when we try to put them together? My final thoughts in a moment. Our year in review reminds us that our journalism at Context fills a unique niche. We've welcomed ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances and introduced a question so rarely asked in media. Where is God in all this? It's journalism that looks into events for the character of God, the reality of sin, and the reality of lives surrendered to Christ. People make choices differently when those three things are discovered. And those choices make the news we cover. At year end, we need to say thank you, as every episode we do only happens because we are completely donor supported by you, our viewers. So for all of us at Context, thank you. Thank you for standing with us. And we'll be back to look at life beyond the headlines in 2013.